In this video, I'm going to implement a didSelectRowIndexPath function, or I'm going to continue working with it. And when user clicks on one of the rows here in our table view, we will need to extract user details and pass it on to our next view controller, which is going to be a table view controller. So when I tap on Michael, for example, the user Michael is taken from our users array and it's passed on to our next table view controller, which we are going to create now in this video as well. Okay, so let's do that. Let's go back to our didSelectRowIndexPath function, because this function is called when a user clicks on the table row. And the very first thing that we need to do is we need to access user details. And remember, our users are stored in the users array here. So we will create a new object. Let me call it selected user, and it's going to be of type parse pfuser, and we will read it from users array for the row that was selected. And we know that selected row can be accessed from the index path object here, and by referencing to its row property. Okay, now we have users table, and we can access username, and we can access username or object ID, or we can access any details of that particular user. But we won't do it right here. We will send it forward, entire object. We will send entire object forward to our next view controller. So let's do that. Let's switch to our main storyboard, and we will create a new view controller, which is going to be a table view controller this time, to make it different. So before I was integrating table view into my view controller, but now I will use table view controller. And I will resize it to 4 inch so I have more space. And while here in the table view controller, I already have prototype cells, but I will need to assign identifier for this cell. So I will open up document outline to make sure my table view cell is selected. And then in the attributes inspector here, yes, attributes inspector, for the table view cell identifier, I will give it an identifier music cell. So that's or a song cell. It could be a song, because we're displaying a list of songs that this user has uploaded or stored in their parse table. Okay, so the music cell is created, and we can check if we have outlets created for this table view. Yes, the difference between using table view controller is that outlets are already set up. We don't need to do it just like we did for the table view. Everything is good. The only thing we need to do here is that this is absolutely empty table view controller. We don't have any custom class assigned to it, and this is what we need to do. We will create a new custom class, and we will assign it to table view. So I will select my project folder, select new file, iOS source code, Kakao Touch class, next, and I will give it a name music table view controller, and should be subclass of UI table view controller. Very important, it should be subclass of UI table view controller, language Swift, next, create. Okay, so music table view controller is created, and it is subclass of UI table view. I go back to main storyboard, select my table view controller. I don't need my document outline anymore. Don't need right left side panel. And if I switch to identity inspector, I want to assign this custom class. So that's going to be music table view controller. If I start typing, Xcode will auto suggest the name and I will copy this name and I will reuse it for the identity storyboard ID. I need this identity storyboard ID so that I can instantiate this view controller from the storyboard using my Swift code. Okay, and I think this is it for creating user interface for this table view controller. Very simple. So let's go back to our view controller now, and we have user. Now we need to send user forward to our music table view controller, and before we can do that, we need to create a new object for that music table view controller. The name can be different, and we will need to access storyboard, and from the storyboard we will call instantiate view controller with identifier, which we gave to our table view, and we gave it an identifier music table view controller. Okay, and one more thing, I think we need to downcast it to music table view controller. Okay, now we have music table view controller, and we can use self navigation controller. We can push user to that music table view controller, animated true, and once this takes place, user will see a table view controller, but that table view controller will be empty if we run this application for two reasons. First, we did not pass user information yet, and second, we did not load anything into that table. So, and the way we pass information forward from one view controller to another is this. I will go to my music table view controller, and first of all I will create a holder or an object that will store that selected user, and it's going to be just the same object. So I'll create a var selected user. I'll call it selected user, and it's going to be of type parse user, and it's going to be an optional type, and I will go back to my view controller here, to my did select row index path, and then I will reference my music table view controller, and I'll reference to selected user, and I will set it to the selected user we have in our users table view. And now when we push view controller, we should be able to see selected user object in our music table view controller. And we have an error. It says user when declared. Okay, pf user is not known. This is because we need to import parse, and once we do it, we have a selected user. Okay, so very good. Now let's do some changes to our table view controller. It won't work because, for example, these functions like number of sections in table view and the number of rows in section are not configured. So first of all, I will remove this warning incomplete implementation, and number of sections in our table view, I can hard code it. We will have only one section. Now, number of rows, how many rows we will have on our table view, we don't know. It will depend on the number of music items or number of songs that will be downloaded from Parse. And because it's going to be number of songs, I will need to create a new object, and I'll call them user music items, something like this, and that's going to be of type pf object. It's going to be an empty array of pf objects, and when I now go to my if I go to my number of rows in section, I will need to return a count for this rows for this function, and I can remove the warning sign. Now I don't need all of these functions here because I'm not going to implement them, so I will simply delete them. Okay, and we will also need a table view so that we can reference this table view controller and reload data. So let's go back to main storyboard, and I'll select this view controller, open it up in Assistant Editor. We have an error. Let's go back to it later, and I will select table view, hold Control button on my keyboard, click drag, and drop it here. So I'll create an outlet, and that's going to be of type I'll give it a name, my table, of type table view connect. So now we can use this outlet to reload data. Very good. Okay, so let's go back to our music table view controller and continue with it. Okay, let's look at the error. What does it say? Fix it, insert a consecutive declaration must be separated by, I think the problem actually is not here. Music items should be equal to an empty array. We need to initialize it. Yeah, now the problem is gone. Okay, so we have users, music items array, and now we are ready to load information from our parse class, and we will load it actually every time when this table view appears. So we will need to override a new function, and that's going to be view will appear, and super view will appear animated every time. So that's the function we need to override. Every time when this view will appear, this function will be called, and we will create a new function which will be called like load user music, and that function will send one argument which is going to be selected user to it, because we will need that user so that we can query information from the music table. And I will declare this function below, and we have one parameter that this function accepts, and that's going to be, we'll call it selected user as well, and it's going to be of type pf user. Very good. And we need a function implementation body, and we don't need this. Okay, so we have a function load user music. Let's just copy function name to make sure they're the same. Okay, and again, very similar to our previous example. First of all, we need to create a music query, which is going to be of type parse query, and we will query a class. We will query a class name music. Right? Let's go to our parse and check what is the table or class name music. Okay, now we have our query, and we will need to use a where key, because that's going to be a kind of conditional selection. We need to select all the records from this class where user is equal to our selected user. Remember, we've created a pointer, so the pointer is of type, we're storing user there. If I go back to music, we have a pointer here, user, and it holds the user that owns this. It holds a pointer to the user that owns this record. Okay, so we are going to music query. You're going to query music class where the key is equal to selected user, And we will also need to include key that's called user, and we need to include this key only because we want to be able to access user details from that record as well. In this particular example, I think is not required really, it's just an optional because we already have selected user here, but I'm going to show you how to include user's record in the query as well, in the result that comes back as well. So now this is it. We can execute this query and get the results back. So I will use music query to find objects in background with block, and that's going to be our block. So for parse objects, that's I will call it results, result, and for the error, it's going to be error. Okay, we have error and we have results. Again, you can check for error, and if error is not null and you have a message there, you can display that message. But I will hope that everything goes well to simplify this example, and we will simply check if we'll use if flat, and we will say if search results is not empty if there is something in results object. So if results object contains some information that can be assigned to search results, this body will be the code in this curly brackets will be execute, will run. And here I will print something like I'll print found records, and I'll display a count of search results count, something like this, to see how many records we found. And what I need to do now, if I need to assign my user music items array. All right, I need to assign search result to my user music items so that we can display them in our table view. And once we have this information, we can reload. We can access my table view to reload data. And once reload data is called, these functions that belong to table view data source protocol will trigger. Number of sections will be equal to 1, and number of rows and sections will be equal to the amount of music items that was returned. Okay, and there are a couple of more functions that we need to implement here actually, and I think I've accidentally deleted it, but maybe not. What we need a cell for row index path. So if I type table view, I will need to look for cell for row index path, this one, because we need cells in our table view, and cell for row index path will return a table view cell, and we will need to create that cell. So let's create a new object, and that's going to be music cell equals to table view dq cell with identifier, and I don't remember what was that identifier. So let's go back to our main table, main storyboard, select the prototype cell for the music table view controller, open up right side panel and look for this, look for the cell. We need cell. We need to select the cell, prototype cell, then switch to identity inspector, attributes inspector, and for the identifier, for the cell identifier, we've set music cell. So this is what we need. I'll go back to table view controller and paste the cell identifier here. Okay, so we have a cell, and now we need to set the value to that cell, and the value should be the book's title. So first of all, let's get the books record, the music record out of that music array. So I will create music item equals to user music items, right? And that's array, so we need a value for each row of an index path. So we have a music item, and now let's create a new variables, like we will music song item, just for debugging purposes. We can assign it to a new object. So music item object for key, and I think we've called it song title, and it was of type string. Let's double check. Let's go to our parse class. So we have music class, and that class has song title here, song title, and we call it song title, so that's correct, as a string. And so we have a song title now. So let's reference our music cell, and we will reference text label text equals to music song title. Okay, and the last line, we will need to return music cell, and the error should be gone now. Save table view for row as index path. Let's try building this. Overriding declaration requires override. That's true. Override, because we are overriding a function from the data, from one of the data UITableView data source. Overriding declaration requires override. Let's just copy. Okay, so our build is successful and it should work now. So let's run this example and see how it works. Okay, so we have users loaded, and now if I click on Michael, I'm taken to the next view controller, but no records found. Let's click on Bill. I'm taken to the next view controller, no records found. I'm clicking on John. We have 2 songs that belong to John. 1, 2. Very good. So it's working. Let's just double check with Parse. So our music class has only 2 records, and they both belong to one user. That if I click on this user, I'm taken to the user whose first name is John. So let's create a new music item. So I'll add a new row, and I will create a song title that's going to be Summer Song, and this song will be assigned to a different artist. We're not assigning, the artist name is custom. Absolutely, I can create my name here. It's just a text value, but what's important is user that owns this song. So I'll go to users table, and I'll this time select a different user. Let me select Bill, for example. I will double click here on the object ID, and then I'll go back to music, and I will, for this music summer song, I will double click and paste an ID of a different user. Now if I switch back to my application and I click on Bill, Bill should be an owner of Summer Song, so that's working. John has 2 songs and Michael doesn't have any. Okay, so application is working. Let's continue.